I don't really need to introduce this next speaker. If you don't know Doug Laney by this point, you're missing out on an entire part of what's going on in the data world. So Doug is one of my favorite people to hear speak, so I'm really pleased that I'm able to introduce him here. But he wrote a little book a while ago. Anybody remember the title of it? And it was? Infonomics, exactly. So the idea that data shouldn't be on the spreadsheet is a really bad idea. Balance sheet, thank you. Yes, they're always on the damn spreadsheets. Boy, that's a Freudian slip, isn't it? It's also a bad idea. Absolutely. Doug has been working on that for a long time. He's also been very involved in the academic portions of this, so he teaches classes to a couple hundred each semester in MBA or graduate programs, and has them doing research in these fields as well. So we're really grateful that Doug likes to kind of have one foot in the academic world as well as one foot in the practical real world on this. Today he's going to talk about best practices. Now, this is kind of interesting. How many of you are in the federal government? Okay, just a couple of you, but that's good still. One of the things that the new evidence law says is you must follow best practices, and everybody keeps saying, what are they? Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you. Thanks. Got the mic on? There we go. Good. I didn't let him mic me before I went. Well, I'll tell you a story. So years ago, I was speaking at got asked to speak at the CIA. And they have a facility there called The Bubble. It's in Laney. And so I was talking about big data, but the guy who introduced me got off stage. I started speaking. And about 5 or 10 minutes in, you hear the sound of water rushing and toilets flushing. The guy had forgot to take his mic off or turn it off before he went to the men's room. And so the woman who's working the soundboard is doing all sorts of stuff like this and trying to turn the knobs and can't shut it off. And it was really loud, great acoustics in the bubble. And
thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so I figured I got to say something. I really couldn't talk over it, but I had to say something. So I had 2 ideas in mind. So you guys can let me know if I use the right one. I said, so you guys really do record everything. And then I was thinking of this other one, which was I thought we had stopped waterboarding, but I figured I wouldn't get out of there alive if I did that. Yeah, and then somebody made a comment about a leak, and I thought maybe I shouldn't use that either. So anyway, CIA leaks. So here we go. So best practices. It might be a little bit overstated what best practices are, but what we did was we looked at how organizations are using, how they are monetizing data or sharing or exchanging data externally, whether they're using marketplaces and so forth. So again, I'm Doug Laney. I'm with a consultancy called West Monroe, based out of Chicago. We're a digital services firm that kind of brings together business and technology consulting services. I'm what's called an innovation fellow. So my role is to be outward facing and do things like this, participate on projects as a senior data strategist, and then help to develop new offerings, typically those around data monetization, data value, and data valuation, as Peter was mentioning. That's stuff that I've been researching back since my Gartner days. All right, so let's jump in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a shout out to some of the folks who are involved in this study, and then I'm going to share some of the basic findings. Then we're going to get into some of the insights, and would love some commentary from everyone as to maybe some analysis behind this. We're still kind of crunching and looking at this data, and then if we have time, and I'm really hoping to be able to do this, and if we go over and you want to stay, I'm actually going to bring up ChatGPT-4's Code Interpreter beta product, and we're going to actually analyze the survey data live, hopefully. So, all right. So I am clicking, and let's get back to my slide here. There we go. So shout out not only to my firm West Monroe, but to Revelate, who sponsored this survey. Revelate is a data marketplace vendor based in Vancouver. And to our friends at 486, who helped to analyze the data and advise on the survey. 1486 out of University of Pittsburgh is kind of what they're doing is they're trying to connect data buyers and sellers and kind of take friction out of that data marketplace scenario. So they're doing both research and development on that. So thank you to Andy and your team for your support. Nomad Data also participated. Nomad is a a company that is basically a search engine for external data. So if you're looking for external data sources, you can subscribe to them and get connected not only with commercial data sources, but with companies who are making their data available. They also have a new capability for data relationship management. So if you want to keep track of all the data vendors that you're using inside your organization, they can help with that. And I think you know most of the other folks. Gulp Data is a unique one. It's a company that does data valuation and helps organizations collateralize their data. You may have read an article I posted a couple years ago about the airlines and how they had to collateralize their customer loyalty programs to stay aloft, pun intended, at the beginning of the pandemic. And that the valuations they got for those programs were 2 to 3x the value of the companies themselves. So I wrote about that, and Gulp has kind of picked up on that idea and is helping companies who are data rich and perhaps cash poor collateralize their data. So they were involved in this as well. And so anyway, thank you to everyone who was involved. Thank you to those of you who participated in the study as well. All right, so methodology was an open online survey for a few months this summer. We have about 594 responses. And one of the things that we like to do is kind of correlate how an organization perceives itself from a performance perspective versus its peers, and whether that's a public or non-public organization or a government or commercial organization. Just how do you compare yourselves to your peers? So we use that to kind of gauge and index best practices for those who are self-reporting at the high end versus those who are kind of self-reporting their performance at the low end. So again, you can see credits to those who participated. We had a number of people who helped in analyzing the data as well. All right, so demographics, obviously highly indexed toward North America, a good variety of industries, a little bit heavily indexed on I think banking, financial services, and technology. Good respondent demographics when it comes to the size of the organization, and a good spread of people from different roles in the organization as well. I won't get into detail on this. And we also asked what level in the organization you are, so we can kind of look at, do people at higher levels in an organization, if they're executives, do they perceive things a little bit differently than those who are perhaps in management or specialists? And then we had a few people who are outside consultants weigh in as well. All right, so with that, let's get into some of the basic findings, and then we'll get into the insights in a bit. But I kind of want to, and as we're going through this, think about what questions you might want to ask, because if we're going to try to get to using the GPT-4 code interpreter live. So as we go through this, get a sense of what kind of questions that we asked and what kinds of data was collected. I'm not going to show you the whole data model, but you'll get a sense. But think of some questions that you might want to ask, and then we'll do that at the end. All right. So we asked, how would your organization characterize your data maturity today? We looked at kind of three things, and I'll share in a bit why these three kind of partitions of data maturity exist. So we asked them, are you kind of data nascent, where you're really not using data much to transform the organization? Are you digitally transforming? Are you kind of in the mode right now where you are using data to affect business processes in a positive way? Or are you actually data driven, really kind of automating things, or using data and more sophisticated analytics to affect higher levels of performance? So we found that 60% of data nascent organizations really expect to evolve to become data driven or digitally transformed in 2 years. Great aspirations. I think that kind of goes without saying. When we looked at what data is most often shared among business units, clearly it's data that is what kind of data you're sharing with whom. Most organizations are sharing data internally, of course, and then least often is data that licensing data publicly. But we'll take a look at that because we'll actually see some growth in that area. Then we asked, how much does your organization share data with others, and what kind of data does it share? And probably no surprise that product marketing and financial data are most often shared, and then we find that legal and employee and IP and risk-related and even supply chain data are least often shared. A bit surprised about supply chain data. I would think that supply chain data would be shared more often, particularly if you are a manufacturer. You probably want to share your supply chain data with your and retailers to drive better efficiency in the whole distribution process. But I'm not sure why that was particularly low. I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts on why supply chain data is not shared that often?
Well, we're just implementing standards for supply chain risk management.
There's standards for.
Supply chain risk management.
Okay.
And they're just beginning to implement them. It's very difficult. We saw what SolarWinds did to us.
Right. So because of compliance issues, it's difficult to share supply chain data, or?
Well, we're just working to dig it out. Figure out
To dig it out, okay.
what the supply chain looks like.
All right, okay.
It also can reveal your costs, which could jeopardize your margin.
Good point,
compression.
right? Yeah, I mean, there are a whole bunch of externalities to sharing data, and we're going to talk about what some of those concerns are among folks as well. Yes? Go ahead.
Some companies think that supply chain is operations, so maybe when you add these two together, there's maybe a different.
Maybe it wasn't a clear partition between the supply chain and operational data. Yeah, okay, good. And so then we asked, what are the benefits that your organization gets from sharing or licensing data externally? And we found that, interestingly, collaboration and decision-making and promoting offerings are the main reasons that folks share data externally. Least often is to generate revenue. So clearly there's an opportunity for more organizations to generate revenue or some kind of commercial benefits from sharing their data externally. And we'll actually see that there are some intentions to greatly expand this in the coming years. How would you estimate your level of ROI for your organization is achieved thus far? More than half of organizations are achieving 1x, or claim they're achieving 1x or less ROI so far from sharing data externally. So this may be that those efforts are failing. It may be because they're nascent. So I think it bears further analysis as to what stage of process these organizations are in who are not yet achieving positive ROI numbers. But still, we found that more than half of organizations are already generating 2x from sharing data externally. So we asked, what forms of data provisioning to others do you use today? And we found that organizations plan to reduce providing bulk data access and are increasingly creating data products and commercializing data for their business units. Okay. So, yes, sir.
When you,
yep.
when you say data products, do you include insights and analytics or just the data?
We really, go ahead. Yeah, it's a good question. We really did not ask the respondents to specify what they mean by data product or data marketplace. We kind of left it up to their own devices. We could have probably prescribed what those definitions were, but we decided to keep it open because there are so many different perceptions about what a data product or what a data marketplace is. But I think for the purposes of the study, I think most people recognize that we're not talking about data product in the in the virtualized data sense, right? In the data fabric sense, we're talking about data product in the something that we package and sell or use distinctly to consume internally. So, yeah.
Thanks for trying to get that.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that we may have thought about doing is prescribing what we mean by data product and data marketplace and so forth. We just decided to keep it open because everybody kind of has their own different kind of vision or definition of what that means. So then we asked what mechanisms do you use to make data available, and we see here organizations typically plan to increase participating in formal data exchanges, and almost 2x, so pretty impressive aspirations for organizations. Do you intend to implement a data marketplace technology? So yes, there are data marketplace technologies out there. I mentioned Revelate, there are others as well. And so yes, you can participate on an exchange. You can also implement your own technology for monetizing or externalizing your data. And we found that nearly 60% of organizations plan to implement a marketplace technology within the 2 years. Has anybody here implemented a data marketplace technology? So, anyone? Yeah? Which one? Do you mind saying or no?
Sure, Informatica.
Informatica? Okay, I can repeat if that's okay, if it's a quick answer, yeah. Anyone else? Sir? Informatica as well? Okay.
DMP of Oracle.
Oracle?
The DMP of Oracle.
DMP of Oracle, okay. Anyone else? All right, great. So then we asked, how significant do you find these challenges with licensing and acquiring data from others? This is the question about friction, and I know it's something that the folks at 1486 are researching. And so we wanted to ask that question about where's the friction in licensing external data? This is not selling data, but licensing data from others. And we found that the greatest sources of friction are related to data quality and the whole process of licensing data. You know, interestingly, we find that in many organizations there's an entire department dedicated to procuring office supplies and not a single person dedicated to procuring data supplies. And so that's a bit of a oddity or dichotomy. Yeah. Scott?
There are
Yeah.
also some legacy data providers, I don't know if you ran into this, who tend to license by use case still.
Okay.
And I consider that a legacy approach too. So they go to an enterprise, like you use it in marketing, but you gotta buy it again for finance.
Right.
I don't know if that's in any of your numbers you've heard.
No, we didn't explicitly. I think that's part of the friction process, right? That, you know, you license data from a data provider or perhaps from a partner, right? And there are some conditions on how much you can use that data for a particular use case or a particular department or number of users, and then you've got to relicense it again for other purposes, or use it illegally for other. But then there's also friction in the buying process. I spoke to an automobile company, and they said, yeah, we just find it so difficult to share data internally that we've licensed, that we have multiple business units licensing the exact same data, because it's easier to do that than figure out how to share data alternative data internally, right? So, yeah, so that's all part of this overall friction. But, you know, I think we need to figure out how to make this a bit more frictionless. Hopefully, Andy, you and your crew are going to come up with some ideas on this. You know, a lot of the marketplaces have as well, but there's still a lot of issues. I think a lot of the issues have to do with I think a lot of the issues are contractual. Legal teams have not really caught up to the nuances of licensing data. Like, one of the things that we often never see in a data license agreement is the notion of survivability, which is, I license data from you, that contract expires or is terminated, do I get to keep using that data or not? Or do I have to return it or delete it? And it's just something that we typically are not seeing in a lot of license agreements. So, any other sources of friction that you're of note, Andy, that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, I think the taxonomy, just having a common language.
Okay, common language and taxonomy.
And,
Yeah.
and really around the legal process, ownership, as we've talked about in the past, like how do you define ownership, and you know, how do you return it? So all these legal
Yeah.
things that you figured out for software, for physical goods, we just don't have a common language yet.
Okay, so common language, for those of you, I don't know if folks can hear online, but yeah, having a common language and taxonomy. Thank you.
I
Ed,
have
go
to
ahead.
say, so they just moved data acquisition to my office, the office of the CDO.
Uh,
So
where
we're
it probably should be.
responsible for
Yep.
all of data acquisition as well as we define a taxonomy.
Yeah.
Do you have lunch plans?
Yeah. So we are seeing, and that's probably where it does belong. Data acquisition does belong in the office of the CDO. We have seen where some organizations have their existing procurement departments also involved in procuring third-party data as well. And I don't know if there's any particular right way to do it, but certainly the CDO should be involved, right, with anything having to do with external data, whether it's in or out. All right. So let's get into some analysis and insights, and let's spend some time also thinking about, you know, what are the ramifications behind this? What are the reasons behind some of these insights? So we started kind of correlating some of the data in the survey, and what we found is that businesses with both internal and external marketplaces are twice as likely to be outperforming their peers. So again, we asked people to self-report on their organizations, and we took that. You know, we took that answer. We asked people to kind of rate themselves on a 0 to 100 scale, and I think I showed earlier that the average was 63. So that's fine. People inflate their their performance, or maybe only the high-performing organizations tended to respond to the study. But one of the things that we did, and we'll do later, is define a kind of high-performing and low-performing organizations out at the edges beyond a standard deviation, and then kind of look at some of that analysis. But yeah, so interestingly, companies that typically are outperforming others in their organizations are ones that have both internal and external data marketplaces. This may show an overall greater maturity. It may show greater comfort with their data in order to be able to do this. And that kind of comfort with their data manifests not only in how they exchange it and share it externally, but how they're using it internally for other purposes as well. Okay. Any other thoughts on what, why this might be? We found that businesses with both internal and external data marketplaces are on average generating 3x ROI on their data assets. And so again, they're finding new ways to generate value. And this is really something that we've heard over and over this week, is really part of the CDO's job, is to turn that cost center, data management cost center, into a value driver, into a profit center. Something that I'm particularly focused on researching and writing about and advising clients on. And I kind of have this philosophy that if your current data lake or data warehouse or data mesh or whatever isn't generating positive ROI, then either you're not using it well enough, or you're not measuring the impact well enough, connecting the dots between how that data is used and the processes that are using that data. So when we help organizations value their data, that's one of the things we're looking at. What is the cost basis of that data? What did it cost to acquire, generate, store, supply, secure, integrate, versus what is its contribution to some business process that's generating revenue or some other source of value. And looking at that gap is really important, and closing that gap. The second book I published that you may know is the Data Juice book, and those are stories of how organizations are using data in high value and innovative ways. So, but the bottom line is, and it's meant to kind of inspire or shame organizations into doing more with their data. But really, I think anyone who is not measuring the economic impact of their data warehouse or data lake really needs to start doing that. All right. Any other thoughts on this? Just want to make this as interactive as you'd like it to be. All right. So we had some hypotheses that we were testing as well, and one of the hypotheses was that the biggest inhibitor to creating external data marketplaces are, and I put the word in there, perceived compliance concerns, because sometimes compliance concerns aren't totally legit, but the legal team kind of gives pause to the idea nonetheless. And so we found this was true, that the inhibitors mentioned most often were privacy, regulatory compliance, and security concerns, even more so than things like data quality or data integration. And again, this is for external data marketplaces. All right. But we had a hypothesis that for internal data marketplaces, the biggest inhibitor was data quality concerns. That actually turned out to be false. The inhibitors to internal data marketplaces are similar to those for external data marketplaces: privacy, compliance, and security. So, interesting. Not sure why data quality doesn't feature higher, but we'll actually see that it does feature higher for certain kinds of organizations in a bit. Any thoughts on this? Yeah, sir. You want to let's get mic'd up. Give you some exercise.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Back to this concept of the marketplace, the vendors and the partners in the marketplace not having a standard. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'd like to be able to share this data, but then my partner would need to be able to consume it, and they're not ready to consume it. And without an industry standard, it kind of inhibits the ability for me to share. Is that?
It does. That's part of the major friction there as well, right? Yeah. Please.
Just another thought on why you're seeing, and I don't know what types of businesses were surveyed in this. I don't know if you have a section of that.
I showed it at the beginning.
You showed at the beginning, but in terms of, some data have higher regulatory requirements, other data don't. But maybe data quality didn't feature as much is because people are so mired with the privacy and security issues.
Maybe.
Once they get past it, they'll figure out, oh my God, quality and integration is such a big deal.
Yeah, or maybe they don't even think about monetizing or externalizing data before they've dealt with data quality. And so by the time they get to planning or designing a data marketplace kind of solution or participating in an external data marketplace, they've already dealt with data quality. That could be it as well.
You asked
These
for
are
interactive.
all good
Doug.
questions. Yeah, please, Margot.
Is it possible that I saw that a lot of executives responded to your survey that data quality is not top of their mind?
Let's ask that question when we get to the hopeful interactive portion. Save that one. We'll investigate that. Good question. Another? Hi.
Yeah, hi, Christian from Germany. What I discovered, especially in Germany and in Europe, is that the legal basis, like the contracts between legal entities in a corporation, are not there for sharing data between them.
Yeah. Unless it's an explicit data sharing, but you're often sharing data as part of a software licensing agreement or a support agreement for something. There are a lot of questions about whether, who owns the data, who has rights to the data, can the data actually be retained in the flow of a business process between two businesses that may not be explicitly about data, but data is actually exchanged as part of that process. Really, really great point. And so I think, yeah, again, the legal profession is a bit behind on this. Please.
Doug, I was surprised by this. I mean, I think for us it's not only data quality, but the challenge is what we call the delivery mechanism, because you have many different things, and the producers and the consumers have different systems. I mean, we all have kind of aligned systems, but they have different kinds of consumption pattern, and that's typically our challenge.
Okay.
One more, Doug.
Very good. And that goes along with the whole taxonomy discussion, or is it more about structure?
It's not only about structure. It's more you have different delivery mechanisms into the things where you make sense out of it. You know? So you have insights engines,
Right.
to make it simple, and you have to put this in. And these semantic things, layers, access layers, and how you pull this in when you have a huge ecosystem. That's kind of the challenge.
Okay. So it's more than just with delivering data to people and eyeballs. It's about the systems themselves and how they ingest data differently that is problematic. Yeah. It's something that I wrote about in Infonomics, which is increasingly the primary consumers of data are machines, not people, or applications, not people. And so we need to be thinking more about how to, maybe I'll cover this next year, how to architect systems, how to architect data environments in a way that make them more consumable by machines and technology than just presenting bar charts at eyeballs, right?
Thanks. So I can just follow up on that. I was really surprised, to be honest. And I agree with the comment before me. I think it would be really worth to dig deeper into why this aspect is not really reflected here, like data quality on the one hand side, and also standardization and how it reflects. If you receive data from your customer, how can you map them?
Yeah, we learned this at Gartner that surveys analyses ask more questions than they often answer. So I'm comfortable. I became comfortable with that. But yeah, there's a lot of deeper questions that we might ask here, and maybe again, given time, we'll investigate some of that. But yeah, it's hard to know motivations from a study, from a survey where you're not actually doing interviews. But yes, sir.
Just one quick reaction here. The three things that you have listed at the bottom here: privacy, regulatory compliance, and security. They all kind of manifest themselves as issues prior to the data being shared, whereas data quality can manifest itself potentially more as it's used. So I wonder
if you haven't measured it beforehand.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why these are coming out as the inhibitors more than
perhaps. And like I suggested, perhaps you're only sharing data that you know has sufficient, as my colleague at Gartner Ted Friedman called it, fit for purpose. So we already know it's fit for purpose before we actually are monetizing it or exchanging it internally. So, yeah. Or maybe you're right. Only after we're exchanging it internally do we realize that there are quality issues. Yeah. Okay. All right. Next is we found those with the lowest overall data marketplace ROI are ones with the greatest concerns about data quality. So there maybe is an answer to kind of that question, which is those who aren't getting a lot of value from data, there are still trust issues with the data that are endemic to data quality issues. Also, they're concerned about the unintentional consequences of sharing data, both internally and externally. So you never know how people are going to use the data, and so you kind of have to think through that and be prepared for folks to use data in ways that you hadn't really conceived before. So then we asked about kind of these three basic levels of maturity, and we found that data marketplace, the ROI that folks are getting from data marketplaces increases with their overall data maturity. So if they're an organization, and I don't know what the cause of effect relationship is here, but they're highly correlated. We found that companies that have high ROI are ones that are typically more data driven, or at least transforming with data. That those data nascent organizations are not getting ROI from their data marketplaces, even if they have one. Okay. All right. Any thoughts on this? Okay. Don't worry, class. No quiz. Everyone's getting A's, right? And then we found that 20% of organizations that have both internal and external marketplaces still consider themselves data nascent. So, yeah. Interesting that many organizations still are kind of at the bottom end of maturity, but have already implemented a data marketplace. Perhaps, as it says here, they know they're still at the beginning of the journey, and they know that there's still a lot that they don't know. I think that was analysis from your team, right? Yep. Good. All right. There are some organizations that claim they are achieving 10x ROI on their data marketplace initiatives, and those that are doing so and typically achieving 2x or greater are in particular industries. They tend to index toward healthcare, business services, financial services, and high tech. Companies that are typically have a lot of data. So we'll see that those that are achieving lower ROI are those maybe perhaps not collecting a lot of data, or have data that's really specific to their industry or their business that is not as externally monetizable. Okay, so those that are least likely to be achieving positive ROI are utilities, manufacturing, and government. Government, of course, being inhibited from sharing a lot of data other than what they're required to do publicly. Manufacturing, because a lot of manufacturing processes are really very specific, don't generate a lot of data that might be valuable to others, or even others throughout the organization. And then similar with utilities, very specific to how they're capturing data. I think utilities probably have a greater opportunity to leverage their data, monetize their data more than they are already. So, go ahead. Hold on, Mike.
Just a clarification, when you say data marketplace initiatives, are you counting both internal and external marketplaces?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, thank you. There was another comment, question?
Yeah, I was just mentioning with respect to ESG reporting requirements, I would think utilities would go up.
Yeah.
We're just kind of to keep the net people happy, so.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All right. We had another hypothesis here that IT organizations are the primary sponsors of data marketplace initiatives. I see a lot of head shakes. That was a bad hypothesis, huh? There's no bad hypothesis. But that was false. So the primary sponsors are actually CEOs and COOs, not even CDOs, but following that, data and analytics leaders and then business line leaders as well. We found also, I think you folks found that IT organizations tend to go more slow, worrying about kind of the unintended consequences a little bit more, perhaps concerned with security as a major issue. Okay. Any thoughts or feedback on this? Good. All right. And then another hypothesis here that organizations take a similar journey. So we're kind of looking at the journey that they take to sharing data or commercializing it. And we actually found that there really is no kind of typical journey that jumped out at us. Some organizations tend to start with an internal data marketplace, others with an external one, and they gauge the scope and the ROI differently from organization to organization. So good. Perhaps we need a bit of a kind of a methodology behind this.
Just, I'm curious.
Yes.
We've been using the term marketplace, and I think I know what I think it is. Was that defined as part of the survey?
Like I said, it was not defined. We let people define it in their own minds. We didn't want to prescribe that. But it's a good question. I mean, how do you define? I'd love to hear from folks how they define a data marketplace.
So I have two different perspectives. I currently
Okay.
work in government, so my perspective on marketplace in the current environment is increased transparency for trust.
Okay, that's a benefit, right?
That's the purpose of
Okay.
having a marketplace. So that defines what a marketplace looks like. It could be a data.gov like portal where data is shared, but also a way for vendors to provide information back or feedback to the government. Prior lives, I think more about the marketplace as a platform for exchange of data and exchange of monetary valuation.
Of some kind of value.
Some kind of value or some kind of benefit amongst the folks who are exchanging the data. You know, buyer, seller, bartering, whatever that is. Right?
So we think generally about a marketplace, it's a way to connect buyers and sellers, right? And express the descriptions, definitions of those products, right? Even maybe give samples, you know, pretty much like any other marketplace, but exchanging something. And that exchange may be non-commercial, it may be commercial, it may be just relationship driven, right? Fit, yeah. So, okay. Anyone else have a definition of marketplace, data marketplace that they use?
Doug, I'll just give you an experience point. I'm back from China last week, and I spent a day at the Shanghai Market Data Exchange, and they have been challenged with all of the other provinces to do better. So they are scrambling and trying to find internal competition, but clearly they presented here last year. They had some really interesting things that they're working on. So, and when President Xi says this is important,
it is important.
They're kind of paying attention.
Yep, very good. All right, a few more insights here. So we were talking about journeys, and this is an interesting couple of journey maps that Revelate has come up with that I think are I don't know if they're instructive or maybe something that could lead to more of a methodology or approach, a roadmap for organizations. So when it comes to just data sharing in the upper left there, at the point where companies kind of start externalizing data as data services, then typically they're sharing data with partners, then becoming more digitally transformed in terms of maturity, creating ecosystems, and eventually maybe a line of business. So that's kind of one roadmap to data sharing. And then when we're thinking about if you want to get directly into data commercialization, maybe you go a different direction. You start with, as a data nascent organization, start creating data services, then bulk data products, and then move right into data productization and creating a line of business. So I don't think there's any, like we said, we didn't find that there's a particular path, but these might be some roadmaps to consider if you're heading on your own journey. Okay. All right, another hypothesis we had here is that organizations implement external data marketplaces only after internal ones. This is kind of mixed. We found that most organizations start with an internal marketplace, but they quickly tend to adopt an external marketplace even before the internal marketplace is successful. So I guess it's just easy enough to open up your existing marketplace as soon as you have one for internal purposes, or use the same technology or participate in an external marketplace platform, like CDOIQ or something, and then you can kind of white label that internally and then open it up externally. So, we figured that larger businesses are more likely to have implemented a data marketplace, and this is again kind of mostly false but mixed. We found both large and small businesses are more apt to have implemented a data marketplace, and medium-sized ones, for some reason, are a bit lagging. Any thoughts on why that might be? There was a company size thing we asked at the beginning of the survey, yeah. So I think we'll show that a little bit later, or maybe I did already, but I think it was 0 to 1 million, million to 10, I don't remember what they were, but yeah.
Did you have anything that was able to characterize the size of the marketplace in any way, like number of sources, or something like that, that just gave a sense of it?
We're asking more about intentions, not the number of sources, but that would be a great follow-on to this, is to ask about the number of data sources.
You can credit me with that question then in the follow-up research if you like. Thank you.
We'll present next year together. That would be a hoot. That would be a hoot.
My initial reaction to this, having worked in small, mid, and large organizations, within a large organization, there's likely more resources, time, appetite, capability to invest in this. In a small organization, it's sometimes your do or die, and you have that flexibility and agility. Mid-size, every resource counts, so the ability to prioritize beyond anything that isn't direct tied to your ROI or incentives becomes a challenge.
Smaller businesses may be more kind of digital native businesses. They may be more entrepreneurial. Maybe they're short on cash and that they have data to exchange for goods and services or some kind of commercial benefit. That's kind of my thinking on this, but again, a good question that bears further analysis. Good. We found half of organizations to date are licensing data to other. Fewer than 20% are generating cash from licensing their data. So they're getting some other kinds of benefits that they're getting, whether that's goods and services or driving relationships, I think is the most part we see. We see a lot of retailers in particular who are sharing data with their CPG suppliers in order to drive relationships, but also discounts as well. So very much like you go to the grocery store, you scan your loyalty card and you get, we call it a discount, right? But we all know what's happening, right? It's a barter transaction, right? We're exchanging information. You're laughing about us and our purchase for free food. So this kind of thing is happening more and more in the B2B world as well. There's maybe a particular advantage to bartering with data rather than selling it for cash. Anyone have a thought on that?
Non-taxable.
Taxable, right? Yeah, right. Although I do understand some retailers are being conservative and paying tax on the discounted value of the goods and services. So, yeah. And then we found of the organizations that are receiving greater than 5x ROI, almost 50% say cash compensation is the major benefit. So this may speak to the ability to sell data for cash, but also perhaps the inability to measure other benefits that you're accruing from externalizing data. So, and I think it's probably more of the latter. They're not measuring the impact of, not quantifying the impact of sharing data with partners or others. Just assuming that there's some relationship benefit from that. We found that high-performing organizations are quickly moving away from publishing APIs and to sharing data more with marketplaces. APIs are, of course, a very popular way to share data, but moving more toward formal data marketplaces. Okay. I see some folks taking photos. Oh, wait. You good? Sir, another question here?
No, just a comment, especially in the space like healthcare where I live in. With the interoperability rules and federal standards, use of APIs is being required. So moving away from APIs into marketplaces is not really moving away from APIs.
Okay.
It's establishing marketplaces in addition to having APIs because they serve different purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, APIs for connecting and synchronizing applications and systems. Yeah, right. So in this context, I think we're talking about marketplaces, not APIs for operational performance, right?
Perhaps one comment. What we recently faced when we were discussing data products and sharing also through marketplaces, there's also API management in a way. And it's sometimes a little bit, if there's a very formalized process of managing APIs, it's very close to also
there is that gray area where there are marketplaces that will host your APIs, right? Right. Yep. Yep. Okay. Over the next 2 years, so we asked folks what are they going to be doing over the next 2 years. We expect to see a 25% increase in introducing commercial data products and a 70% increase in those forming data products lines of businesses. So for those of you not in the data business, have any of you formed a data products business, line of business? The dedicated person to? No one just yet? Well, you will in the next 2 years. Sir? Yeah.
We actually ended up buying
Go ahead.
one
Wait,
of our.
start
Oh,
over.
sorry. Like I was saying, we're in the exciting world of tax. We ended up buying one of our larger data providers, and then so we actually we use that internally. Part of the value we got was not paying them anymore.
Right.
And the other part of the value is that we're selling that alongside some of our applications and services.
Excellent. Okay.
Were you surveyed?
This is across just all industries. This one cut. Maybe that's a question we should ask when we fire it up here. Okay. I hope it works. I'm still nervous. I put on extra deodorant this morning. We're going to use ChatGPT live in a session, right? All right. Let's wrap up the few things. High-performing organizations, kind of some of the differences between them is that they tend to exchange non-public data with other organizations more. So they tend to license data to their customers, and they tend to license data to third parties more often. In terms of benefits that they're getting, they are ascribing benefits, value to improving relationship stickiness, to improving internal decision making through internal marketplaces, and improving overall operational effectiveness. And then they're also finding that high-performing organizations tend to use it to promote their products better than other organizations, use it to introduce new revenue streams, and somebody mentioned ESG before. They're receiving other non-commercial benefit and ESG-related benefits by sharing their data. Okay. So these are the main differences that we found in the high-performing organizations. And then I'll just share a few examples and recommendations, and we'll try to jump online and see what happens. So this is a story that comes from Revelate. They set up a data marketplace for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They now have over 75,000 different kind of configurable data products that they offer through the platform. Increase the number of subscriptions quite a bit, number of new buyers, and so forth. So really great case study on this. I hope they do a write-up on it. This is our process at West Monroe that we go through, and this is specific to a company that's in the hospitality industry. So I kind of redacted some stuff on the next couple of slides, but our process starts with an ideation session, looking at who are the potential stakeholders or consumers of data, what are the available data sources, both inside and outside the organization, what are some hypotheses that we want to test, what are the drivers for the business and those throughout the extended business ecosystem. We look at examples of what other organizations have done. So you hand out copies of the Data Juice book, and we have a library of 500 plus examples that we'll share and use that to kind of inspire folks. We'll look at the range of data sources that are available, again, both inside and outside the organization, and start generating these ideas. And then kind of put them through a feasibility gauntlet where we'll look at their operational, managerial, economic, legal, ethical feasibility, the data quality feasibility, the technical feasibility, and then kind of see what floats to the top. And those that float to the top that are highest, I think I show this, where I show this here, in this slide, those that are highest value and most feasible are the ones that we tend to prioritize. Then we'll go into, very much like any kind of new product process, go into assessing who are the actual buyers, interviewing the actual buyers, thinking about how we're going to package that data. We can package data a lot of different ways that makes it that much more consumable or perhaps more broadly usable. And then we'll do a more deeper financial analysis looking at both the cost and benefit side. So I'll show a little bit here. So that's the process. This is kind of our phased approach to doing the ideation and then the data product validation, and then building out an MVP or prototype. Okay. This is an example from a client that generated a number of different examples. The bubbles represent the opportunity size, and then we went and did a financial analysis on the top 4 ideas, projected revenue, high and low, based on mostly on how well they execute in terms of sales and marketing of the data product. So we create these kind of baseball cards or charts for each of the main ideas that are generated. Okay. So final recommendations, then we'll try to hop online here. First is, use internal data marketplaces to get greater levels of data democratization. It can also help with data governance. Don't wait to implement or participate in external data marketplaces if you're comfortable enough with your data and have really thought through all the potential negative externalities of sharing your data with others. I think CDOs, of course, need to take a greater role in establishing data marketplaces. They should bring in more benefits than just cash. Yes, the primary way to measure the value of externalizing your data is cash, but there are a lot of different other kinds of benefits, whether they're commercial goods and services or discounts or relationships or follow a disciplined product approach to monetization. We were talking a lot about this at this event on how, and one company said that it's really difficult, we're having a difficult time converting or leveraging our existing new product introduction process to creating data products. Like, people don't seem to get it, but I think that's the obvious way to go about creating data products, is use your existing new product introduction design, conception design, and development and implementation process. I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I think take your existing process and apply it. Definitely measure your projected ROI or annual rate of return on your data products. Anticipate the objections and challenges with sharing data both internally and externally. Get out in front on this. Talk to people about how they're actually going to use the data, or create one of the things that we like to do on projects is create a red team that will think through the untoward ways that somebody could actually leverage this data if they, once they get access to it. And then deal head on with the sources of the licensing friction. You're going to come up with a lot of challenges with identifying, finding data, with ensuring the data is clean, correct, complete, is updated sufficiently, how you're going to license it, and how you're able to share it internally. What are alternative data sources that you might consider, and how do they compare? There's just a lot of friction in that process. And so prepare and anticipate for that. All right? All right. Keep your fingers crossed. Here we go.
That's right. Fingers crossed.
Go ahead, Dave. Peter, we've got a comment up here I'm going to get set up. Do you guys need to switch me over to, in the back, do you need to switch me over to my, I have the comm. Okay. All right. Let's do that.
I think just to make one comment, one of the things that you live in this data when you analyze it like this, and one of the things that we see is that we're still very early on in the adoption of these marketplaces. So I think some of these stories are going to unfold as time goes on, but what you see in the themes of the data are what you would expect. That the companies that have the highest quality, the companies that are more mature in their data structure and data products, they're the ones that are outperforming. What I find most interesting is that piece about the benefit. The ones that have the highest ROI are focused on generating cash. So there's that mindset of generating cash from your assets that really drives them.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I would say that piece that you saw, that 70% increase, that was remarkable to me. To see the number of companies that are truly looking to create data products, lines of businesses. So this concept of I can monetize not only internally, but through cash generation. It sort of all fits together, so it'll be fun to see how that unfolds over the next couple of years. Yes?
Thanks, Andy. Oh, do you want to answer that?
No, you got it.
The kinds of data products that are in the data marketplace?
Yeah, the kinds of data products that are in the marketplace.
Well, clearly there's folks selling weather data, GPS data, sales data, forecast data.
Consumer databases.
Yeah, D&B is here. They obviously sell consumer data, tax data. There we go. Right. Yeah. There's a company called Previdaria. I think they're still around. They've pre-aggregated over 2 million distinct external data sources, and then they can kind of use that to identify leading indicators for your own business. Yeah. And I think McKinsey estimated there are 10 million external data sets, public data sets published by organizations around the world.
Yeah, just a quick question. So I see value in a marketplace for things other than selling data. If you're, let's say, a government agency that has a requirement to share data and make it available to the public for transparency purposes,
sure.
as was mentioned earlier. So, I mean, is there a corollary to the marketplace? Because the marketplace sort of implies a monetary transaction,
right?
As opposed to, let's say,
Compliance
some
reporting
corollary.
or ESG reporting or DEI reporting.
And as a CDO of a federal agency, I mean, I'm quite interested in, well, who's using my data, who's looking at my data, who's accessing it, how much are they accessing, et cetera. So, I mean, thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. All right, let's get into this. I'm going to share how this works. I'll stay a little bit. If anyone wants to stay for about 15 minutes afterward, we can continue to play around with it, but officially we're wrapping up in about 7 minutes. So let's go to GPT-4. We're going to do the code interpreter beta. We're going to upload a file. There's our data. Okay.
What's the data? What's in that file?
Okay, let's ask it what data is available. Okay, finished. We can show the work here. There we go. There's the data that, pretty much the columns that it has. All right. One of the things I want to do is I want to set the high performing and low performing kind of thresholds. So let's say set high performing orgs as performance level 80 or greater. These HPOs. Okay. Oh, it's still working here. We don't need to show the work here. There's our little Python code it generates. Call these HPOs. Set low performing orgs at 40 or lower. POs, okay. Okay. Interesting. I didn't even ask for that. Okay. So this here. Still working. Any questions we want to ask?
How do you see the sales and marketing of data products? I mean, just publishing data products on the marketplace won't sell them, right? Do you see any changes in the organizations related to that?
Yes, they have to either upscale their existing sales and marketing or bring on new sales and marketing people to deal with data products. Okay. Any questions about the data?
Well, guys, he wants to show off.
I'm letting GPT show off.
We can ask the.
Sorry?
We can also later ask about the data quality question we had before.
Okay.
So Doug, not for right now, but maybe the team at 1486. It'll be fascinating to have a follow-on or deeper analysis of the data, stratified. The findings that you've shared, they're more generalized overall, but stratified by industry, stratified by type of organization, public sector, otherwise, I think would be a good follow-on if available.
Yep. Any other questions you want to ask? Quality? Yeah. What's the quality question?
The older one about the executives. Are the Data quality, you mentioned why isn't it in the top 3 on people's mind? And I said, I think it's because the executives are more, it's related to the number of executives.
Okay, are executives more concerned with data quality than others in the organization? The same. Yep. What? So these are the things that are more important to, more concerns for executives. But slightly more, only slightly more.
Data integration expense is a real deal breaker.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah. Anything else?
Which is also a bit of a deal breaker.
I would love to see this set up on a kiosk in the center out there so people could just hack at it for a couple days, Doug.
That's a great idea. Train the model. That's a great idea. Do that next year.
You can put this data in the marketplace and sell it.
We'll leave that to Gartner. Which industries are more apt to be, I spelled apt wrong, to be implementing data marketplace technology in the next 2 years? No column for in the next 2 years. Okay? But then sometimes it figures it out. Hold on.
Yeah, how do we know when it's hallucinating?
Sometimes it says I'm sorry, but then it thinks some more and then comes up with the column.
I think you spelled about wrong, and that was what threw it off.
What's the column called? Data marketplace adoption? Yeah.
Well, Doug, you're losing people to lunch.
That's all right.
But,
anyone can stay around.
Yeah,
We'll play around with
absolutely.
it for a bit. But thank you, everyone, for
And
coming. We appreciate it.
Let's give Doug an extra round.
Thanks.
Live demo, right? Got it to work.